Many thanks for those that are still with us here on Morning at NTV as I scrape through the paperwork here in order to be able to bring you the preamble to our next discussion. And of course, it's in line, or rather comes at the backdrop of what we all know to be the 62nd Independence Anniversary celebrations that were held yesterday. There is so much introspection that is going on across the country, across all sectors: agriculture, industry, medicine, architecture. Everyone is trying to see, or rather look and ask the questions that are fundamental. Where has independence taken us this far? The evolution of this process. Can we rightly stand and say we are on the right track of being an independent nation state? Or are we, as some might readily say, we are simply administering ourselves on behalf of the colonial master? That is a bit of a shocker, but I hope that we can get over it. Our next discussion is one that is very timely, and it looks at the state of agriculture since independence, policy and performance in Uganda's agriculture sector over the last 62 years. Many of you who are good when it comes to the readings of history know that Uganda's economy has its, well, backbone anchored on agriculture. There have been interventions here and there to ensure that we bring in ICT and other sectors, including tourism, to bolster economic transformation, but agriculture remains the biggest employer across the country. I have with me a man who has dedicated his time and resources in ensuring that he understands, for the benefit of some of us, what these matters are, especially when it comes to food security. But Africa's food crisis is a long-term in nature. South of the Sahara, it blankets the entire subcontinent. It results in primarily from an alarming deterioration in food production, which has been registered over the last 40 years, or 50 so to speak, and it's increasing at an alarming rate. What are countries doing about that? That's the question I'll put first to David Kabanda. He's the Executive Director at the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. Welcome to the program, first of all, before you begin answering the hard questions.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Yes.
Good morning, viewers. I'm very happy to be with you this morning to have this conversation on something that I take to be fundamental. And for me, Chris, I have told people, yes, we can talk about technology, we can talk about everything, but if we are not fixing agriculture and food, we may be taking a wrong direction.
Interesting there. Previously, you have been viewed as very radical, especially when it comes to matters agriculture and food security. I will not ask you to listen down on that, but to only offer us context, and in a very unhinged way. Right now, 62 years of independence, people are looking back and asking questions. Is this where we should be? Is this where we ought to be? Could we be at a better place than we are right now? And looking at the agriculture sector, there was a time, for example, especially in terms of numbers and ability to export coffee, cotton, and other cash crops, Uganda ranked ahead of certain countries that are ahead of us right now. That alone causes for a lot of thought into what went wrong. How best can we regain that position where we are a leader when it comes to agricultural product exports?
Yeah, I always don't want to start with exports, but because you've started with it, I think we need to have a context around it. You also talked about my radical approach to some of these issues. It comes from a realization that something ought to be done and it is not done. I can tell you, Chris, I think if the ghosts of those who worked so hard to have independence look at us, we all need to be slapped as Ugandans. as we walk on the street, we should just get slaps and we don't know where they are coming from. The ghosts of those people who worked so hard to have independence. Because for me, when I do this analysis, I find out that as we got independent, the sector called food and agriculture got colonized again without knowing. Actually, for me, my push now is to ask a decolonization of the agriculture and food sector, and I'm going to expound on this. Chris, as we start the conversation this morning, Uganda is the only country without a framework law on food and agriculture. We don't have. Now, if you do not have control about something or a sector, you cannot claim to be independent. And if agriculture is employing 70%, this is what government wants us to believe. I don't want to go so much into that. I'll take it at that. That right now 70% of Ugandans are in agriculture and food. That one is too big a percentage to ignore. But why would we continue having a sector that employs that very big majority of Ugandans, and it's not regulated, it is maybe not even understood well, maybe it is not facilitated well, it continues to be in a subsistence. And when I talk about colonization, Chris, is because when we were growing up, I was young, and then in primary they would ask you, what are the cash crops of Uganda? You would quickly say coffee, cotton.
It was a very predictable question.
Then you have a very long tick and you go back very happy.
And you were considered very bright.
That's it. Right now, if you asked, I was in Malaysia last month. Very proud people about their country. The people who are discussing here were talking about countries that were who have gone ahead of us. And these guys are very proud, very confident about who they are as a country, and what they export, what they sell to other countries. If you ask the Ugandan today, that what are you selling as Ugandans, I'm telling you, the likelihood of getting wrong answers is very high, or not getting an answer at all. What does it show us? It shows us that the sector that is very critical to our people and to us has not been given the direction that it ought to have. And let me demonstrate this. You cannot talk about independence, Chris, if you don't know what you are eating. Today, we have statistics showing that 54% of Ugandans spend their income on food. 54%. I mean, 54% of the income
is spent on food.
Is spent on food, meaning that many people are no longer depending on their gardens to eat. They are depending on the market.
On the market.
Someone as a third party saw a gap and then they occupied it. Right now, when you've talked about coffee, I don't know where cotton went. It is still there. You only find it in the prisons, maybe.
We still have some cotton farms in Taleja.
But let me talk about food and export. Actually, if we had leaders who care, and at this point, I'm not talking about politicians. They get annoyed easily. So I'm not talking about...
So you began to fear them?
No, I don't fear them, but it's not also good to deal with people who get annoyed easily.
Aren't you resigning to not acting when you must act?
No, you continue telling them, but you see there is a difference between governance of and governance for.
All right, that's something
so what I wanted to communicate.
Please do.
So we have, as Uganda, we are number 3 globally with the potential to take to the world organic food.
Organic food, yeah.
You understand? But, and when you look at the trillion of dollars that are in that particular subsector in food and agriculture is too wide. So we've spoken to government that can we embrace agroecology such that we can now, promote our food products, promote even other agricultural products, they seem to think that this industry, let me call it industry, is like a non-starter. Where do we find ourselves now? Because the government over the years, punctuated with some political instability, has not given its full power to the food and agriculture sector. Many people have a bit resigned and they are not producing enough. You find now today, if they told you that 18.5 million Ugandans are suffering acute food insecurity, meaning that someone cannot afford a meal a day, isn't it a shame to all of us? 18.5%. And when we talk about food insecurity, many people quickly, kick us into Karamoja. We are not talking about how many, according to the census that has been just given to us, how many people are in Karamoja. You understand? Now when we are talking
if the numbers are to be believed anyway.
Okay, those are the numbers. Maybe we shouldn't also go into that. But the point I'm making is, if we have 18.5 million Ugandans, suffering acute food insecurity, it is a cause for concern, because the moment you talk about food security, it's no longer food that we are talking about. We are talking about the security of the nation. If people are threatened and they don't know what they'll eat next, they are desperate and they can do everything. So what has happened now, that the entire market is now being left to the food industry to deal with Ugandans the way they want. Today, you'll go to the market and you find all kinds of food products, labeled, not labeled, and no wonder many people are now sick, dying because of non-communicable diseases. So, when we come to talk about independence today, Ugandans should even forget about being independent, because if you do not have a culture, if what you're going to eat, when we wake up, I came in the morning, and then you see people in their cars eating, buying on the road, but what are they eating? Is a very fundamental question that we need to ask each one of us. Recently, we saw in the newspapers that many rich people are now dying and poor people are living longer than rich people. And do you know why? It is because of the food environment. The food environment is poisonous. And then
it's poisonous for the rich.
Yes, many people, rich people think that they have a lifestyle that is better, but they are feeding on junk, because our food and agriculture sector has not been developed to nurture human capital development. So what now we wake up to is, you wake up like Chris here, and you are served with a pancake. When I talk about a pancake, of course you Ugandans, you understand. A mixture of some yellow banana and some cassava flour. And of course, you know the problem with the aflatoxins and everything. So now Chris, if you look at Chris, a very responsible corporate person with a family that is looking, and you see in Africa, if you look at Chris, it's not only his family. He could be having like other 8 to 10 families that are depending on him. Now you consistently feed him on food that is slowly killing him. At 45, 50, the guy gives in. And then we say, oh, sorry, we bury that one, we bury another one. I'm not saying that Chris, we are going to bury.
God forbid. I should be able to make my 100. But perfectly, I understand, no doubt.
So we now find ourselves between a very hard place and a rock, because you at one side talking about food insecurity, and another you're talking about food safety. So where do we want to go as a country?
Maybe before you say where we want to go as a country, we've wanted so much to go certain places, become certain peoples, or become a certain country for long. Let me ask questions that I believe are fundamental in our understanding of how best we can get out of here. When you look at the arable land availability in Uganda, there are places that are largely unutilized, and that is the greater part of the country. Juxtapose that with countries that do not have arable land, including countries like Egypt. Egypt is the leading producer of so many agricultural products, fruits, foods, but it only uses under 15% of the land that it has, despite the fact that it's a mass of a country. So I want to understand, you've traveled. You've just told me you've been in Malaysia and you saw how proud these people are of how they do certain things. What are we not doing right? I don't want to dwell on what we're doing wrong, but what are we not doing right that they are doing and can be benchmarked to begin to put the agriculture sector where it ought to be as a catalyst for economic transformation and ultimately economic independence?
I think we lost it at sovereignty level. We do not think that food and agriculture defines our sovereignty.
We don't.
So we are not a sovereign when it comes to food and agriculture. And if people care about this, particularly politicians, we need to think about a decolonization
of agriculture.
What does it mean? It means that we now need to put emphasis on our governance. For example, if you have a Ministry of Health that is supposed to look at nutrition, it must put in place tools and regulations that help nutrition. If you have a ministry like agriculture, why, Chris, on earth would we as a country be here? We had an agriculture, food policy that ended in 2003. Up to now, we do not have a food policy. Which country is that? And when you talk about these issues, the technocrats look at you as if they don't understand what you're talking about. Why should you continue enjoying a situation that is against our sovereignty? When we talk about countries that are proud, you've just talked about Egypt. They are proud as a country to stand and say, we are. We need now to stand and say, we are the Ugandans. But you cannot have the energy and even the passion to say that if you do not have anything backing you in terms of the sovereignty. Food sovereignty is key. If we are talking about coffee, it should be Uganda's or Ugandan coffee. If we are talking about matoke, for example, it should be Ugandan. If we are talking about millet, do you know that millet alone has been infiltrated by new varieties engineered from countries that I cannot mention here, intentionally to take it away from us? It is us. How do we now wake up and be proud like countries like Ethiopia, like who stand up and say, this is our heritage? Which is not happening. And we have left the entire space the food industry is doing whatever. For example, let me tell you, Chris, we have been speaking to Ministry of Health. Why are you not giving us a nutrient profiling model? Such that before I go to eat anything, I can see that these guys have engineered this food and they have added sugar, salt that is going to be killing me. Why don't we have in Uganda a comprehensive food law? We don't have. And this is what I call decolonization. Maybe even the colonizers were better because in 1955 they gave us a food law. But since then, we have cried to this government, give us a food law. They have refused. And we don't know why. And then when you sue them, they start crying, civil society, stop suing us. Ministry of Agriculture, we are going to be suing you because we do not have any option left. We just need to be radicalized. I feel like I should even join people on the streets in Kampala. I put off these suits and then I start just screaming. You are going to die today. There are a few days for you to die because the food and agriculture sector has really, and you see the other thing, Chris, is is in Uganda you can do everything that you want so long as you are not shaking the other big table. So what is happening now? Some few Ugandans who are
all right.
Sorry about that.
My apologies.
Yes,
but, your choice of words.
They now have ventured into that agriculture that brings money.
The agriculture.
And they have cordoned off. If I use that word, let me hope viewers understand it when I say cordon.
Ring fencing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is like
making it only available for a few.
Yes, it is
excluding
a gold
the rest who
mine.
Might also want.
Yes, for a few people. They'll get like a few farmers. They cheat them day in, day out because the farmers don't know what is on the market, on the export market particularly. And then they produce organically, and those guys are damn rich.
David Kabanda, time is not our best ally. What should Uganda do in the next 20 years to re-engineer, condition a new way of doing things? Could population growth also be affecting us, or we should look to the solutions that you've offered as the only magic bullet? Can we work around things like labor migration and change that pattern so that people can stay where they are needed in order to till the land? Is that one of the solutions? No,
it's not even population. We can feed, we lose food here over to 40%. We even don't have people. People should even continue producing more children. What we need is...
That's radical.
Many people are poor in villages and local governments.
Yep.
If they just chose to understand where their strength is. You see, when we are growing up, even now, you know, Chris, people say, Gwondisa. I'm very sorry to use such a phrase on an English...
no, perfect. This is it's language that we speak every day.
Independence starts with feeding yourself in dignity. Being able to feed yourself on culturally acceptable food for you. You understand? That's where we are starting from. Your independence, the sovereignty of the state and of everyone starts with food. So for me, I think if you asked me 20 years, what should we do? There must be a governance for agriculture and food. We need to put in place a very robust framework that looks at food from a systems angle. Don't look at food or agriculture from a piecemeal. These are the things that we've been talking about.
Right.
So we need to see a food systems transformation from farm to fork, looking at industry, looking at transport, looking at infrastructure, but also looking at the garden. Ugandans, stop spraying the gardens with synthetic chemicals. You are killing nature, you are also killing yourselves.
All right. David Kabanda, Executive Director of the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. Many thanks for those submissions, perspectives that no doubt open eyes to new ways of doing things and adaptation of systems that should be able to ensure food security. That will do it for the Take Note. Morning at NTV does continue. Stay with us.